Hey everyone, Doug and Pat here with another episode of The Wealthy Gym Owners. And today we're going to talk about the fact that at some point you just have to stop figuring it out and what actually comes next. So, Doug, let's get started.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting kind of topic to pick at with, the consumption, I would say is a good angle to start with, right? I mean, there's this kind of joy or happiness that might come with you consuming a bunch of information, whether that be on social media, listening to podcasts like this. I mean, that certainly serves a purpose, but I think at a certain point, you have enough to act on. And if we spend all this time consuming, we're not able to implement and not able to act on it. So I think if I look at how I spend my week, I still think there's a time and a place for consumption and education and trying to, learn and get better. But especially once you've kind of got the basis down of the marketing demand, I got my marketing plan in place. I got my conversion in place. Both of those, whether it be implementing the marketing plan or following up with leads, working on conversion, there's nothing that is going to replace the actual work involved in those two. And so just making sure we put in lots of reps and maybe a little bit less focus on the consumption piece of it.
Yeah, I think when I think of this topic, I think of the two sides of it, the consumption versus production ratio and the I need to do it all myself thing, right? And when we think about consumption versus production, a lot of people they mistake consumption for moving the business forward. They rationalize it that way. It's kind of like perfectionism, right? Like it's our excuse to not get in the game. And yeah, I mean, hey, I've read my share of business books and consumed my share of podcasts and still do to this day. But, at some point there's an application component. That's how we're measured, right? Like we get paid for what we get done. We don't get paid for what we learn. We don't get paid for what we know, what we read. So I know one kind of rule or maybe two variations of a rule that I tried to establish with myself a long time ago was everything that I consumed before I'd consume the next thing, I had to figure out a way to apply one lesson from it. It didn't matter if it was at a conference or seminar or read a book, and it didn't have to be something big. I mean, I could derive one email out of a book, and at least I turned that knowledge into something. So there was turning something actionable and then trying to create this ratio of no more than like a 1-to-1 consumption to production. And to be honest, looking back, that's probably a little bit high if you are at a point that you actually already know. You may have to skew it towards the learning side if you're trying to dive into something completely new for a while. But once you're past, like let's say we're trying to figure out Google Ads. Well, there's a heavy lean towards consumption early on. Maybe it's 80% learn, 20% test. But then, before too long, it's, this 50-50 on our time. And then ultimately it should be 20% learn, 80% let's go implement. So if you find yourself really heavy towards consumption and it's not something completely new to you that you're trying to crack the code on, using that time in putting things into action is always going to serve you so much better.
Yeah. And from a demand standpoint, something that I observe and try to help our clients with is, the amount of playbooks that we provide are, I think, phenomenal, but we still have to, it's like, using the sports analogy, right? You can know the playbooks really well and you can study the plays, but you still have to go play the game and you still have to go execute. So, I was talking to a client about this yesterday, like we gotta pick a handful of things, whether that's on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, however we're looking at this. We got to pick a handful of things and make sure we're implementing. So marketing plan example would be, what's your offer going to be for the month? You certainly maybe want to consume refining your copy or refining the call to action or refining the hook, whatever you're going to spend a little bit of time on consuming to make that better. But at the end of the day, like if nobody sees that and nobody gets invited in, the business is no different. And so it's the same thing with lead follow up, right? Like we spend a lot of time on follow up in our programs, and we can mess with articulating the question a certain way or trying to fine tune things. But at the end of the day, some of this is just pure volume of the more people I follow up with, the more conversations I'm going to have. And obviously, as we know, the more conversations I have, the more conversions I'm going to have. So I think it's just a good reminder for not trying to kind of perfect things. And that perfection can lead to, it is a form of procrastination, as you say.
Yeah, and procrastination, I think, as much as anything, it's just fear of consequence, right? I don't want to put myself out here because there's some risk. There's some risk I may, look foolish. I may make a mistake. I may waste some time. But I think the thing that hopefully most of us actually know, even if we don't always think about, is man, everything's just a hypothesis until we put it out in the market and tested. So this perfectionism, it's a myth. It's a silly way to kind of look at stuff because there's no way to know how the market's going to respond. I can't tell you how many sales pages, offers, emails I've put out that I thought, man, this is really good, and the market didn't agree. And then other things that, I'll change one thing or I'll put something out that I'm like, it doesn't really hit with me, but the market responds in a pretty positive way. And I think that fast to test is a pretty good way to think about this. So, I mean, yes, I mean, you're watching or listening to this podcast. So, you're consuming something now. Ideally, you would take whatever you learn from this or whatever maybe it triggers. I know for me, I'll listen to something and it'll just spark a thought that may even not even be directly related. Take that thought, go act on it, right? Like that's how I think we should probably use the information that we're consuming. Like turn it into something, turning it into something directly related or at least momentum, action, movement, carries us a long way. So anything else on that side of it before we shift to I'm just going to do it myself and I'll figure it out?
No, I thought that was great.
All right. So yeah, the other side of figuring it out is I think we all want to feel capable and competent and that I'm capable of doing this thing. I can do it, or maybe I can do it better than somebody else. But at some level, as an owner, as a leader in your business, it is something that's going to yield diminishing returns. In the beginning, kind of have to figure everything out, right? In that startup phase, we are continually kind of wearing every hat. But if you're still operating like a startup 3 years in, then we're probably missing some opportunities, and we're also stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. We're doing tasks that somebody could do more cost effectively. Somebody's probably more skilled in because that is their primary focus instead of 10th on the list of things that they may be competent at. So, the I'll figure it out. What seems like being a jack of all trades is really valuable early on, it can be an anchor later.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's always interesting to look at some of the blind spots that you have. I know for me, it was trying quickly to realize that there are people that prefer things that you may not like. They may be good at it and like it that you don't enjoy. So you think because follow up seems daunting that nobody else likes doing follow up. But I can tell you there are plenty of people out there that they love the upside of a commission structure where if you find the right person and they can get paid per an appointment, they love the upside. And B, they just love connecting with new people and they see it more as this is my opportunity to help more people. And I'm sure we see it that way too, but the task of it may feel overwhelming. And so something like certainly building out your follow-up process, but then realizing that there's probably somebody, if that's all they do all day long, A, if they signed up for that, they probably enjoy it, at least to some degree, or else they wouldn't have taken that job. And B, if that's all they do all day long, they're going to be a heck of a lot better at it than you are trying to do it 15 minutes in between sessions. And so that would be my first thing, whether that's with follow up, with any other role in the business. There's a lot of stuff that we don't like ourselves that we don't think somebody's out there that loves that thing.
Yeah, and I think that looking at it from the upside, we talk at length about playing to your strengths. And I think the more we can evolve our role, it's tough to probably ever get to a point that we're playing to our strengths 100% of the time. But if we go from doing the things that we're truly great at, we're like that top 1% at 20% of the time, and then we're diluted doing all this other stuff, and we can shift and eventually be 50, 75, 80, maybe even 90% of the time. Man, the business gets better. You get more excited about your job because everything that you're doing, you feel like, man, I can really move the needle here. This is exciting. You know, it, and you're functioning at your highest level, and that kind of cascades down, right? Like when you're the leader and you're functioning at a really high level, then that kind of sets the tone for everything else in the business. So there's a lot to be had there. And instead of thinking through this lens of, well, you know what, they're not going to be good at it, I'll just do it, or I don't want to hand things off and pay for things. We have to think probably more about the opportunity cost and the things that we're missing out on by settling for spending our time doing things that somebody else could do more cost effectively, somebody's way more passionate about, or somebody's just further down that skill development path than you are on.
Yeah, for sure. And I always like to remind gym owners that although we're in the life-changing business, our business is not life or death. It's not like we're asking people to perform, open heart surgery where there's all kinds of risk involved. Generally speaking, obviously we want clients to be safe and have an effective workout on the training floor. But outside of safety, if you hire people with smiles, it's really hard to have a bad experience that you cannot train and that you cannot do. I mean, I always think of like pick any entry level job. I mean, there's a little mini golf course in my town that's like been exploding, adding all these extra features, and it's entirely run by high school kids, right? And so if we can get high school kids to be nice and greet people and follow the checklists and clean the course at the end of the night, like there seems to be this, and I'm sure every industry has its challenge, but there seems to be, maybe it's ego, maybe it's lack of trust, whatever it is, that we have to figure it out ourselves, and they don't know it as well as we do. And although that may be true, there's a certain cap that you're going to be able to, you're going to hit a certain cap if you try to figure everything out yourself. And so having a little bit of patience, but also I would say urgency to train somebody up, and knowing that in the beginning they're not going to be as good as you. That's not fair for them. You weren't good when you first started doing the thing you're doing. So certainly realizing that figuring it out and doing it yourself it's a great foundation in the beginning, but at some point there's a tipping point where you have to kind of pass the baton.
Yeah, and I've historically found that many, if not most of the people in our industry, it should be a strength of theirs, the developing other people. I mean, that's what we do with clients, right? We take them from where they are to where they aspire to be, and developing a team member, it largely functions the same way. We assess where they are today, we identify where that target is, and we coach them to get there. And so that should be a strength of ours. And, if you trace back a lot of the stumbling blocks where people kind of have a bad taste in their mouth about, hey, I should just do it myself. I brought this person on, they weren't very good or whatever else. More often than not, they hired quickly. They didn't vet because they hired kind of based on desperation. We have a need, somebody quit, I'm overwhelmed. And then they just kind of threw them to the wolves. They didn't set them up to succeed. Now, with a client, we would do it totally the opposite, right? We would do everything in our power to set them up to succeed because retention's key for us to be, an effective business. But if we think about it through that same lens as a business owner, as a leader in developing people, you're still just playing to what I would hope most of us see as a strength, and that's coaching. So if you treat the new team members, kind of like a coaching client, you're going to be better off. You're going to be playing to your strengths, and then you're going to see how much more leverage that you actually have.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's kind of, similar thought to when we've done previous episodes and trainings on hiring. We say hiring team members is basically the same strategy as trying to go acquire clients. And so I think it's, similar here that if we treat our team members once they're in the door, just like we would treat a client, we wouldn't just hand them off and say, go figure it out. But yet I'm empathetic because I've been there, but it's not the best. It's not, we know deep down it's not the best way to do it and to spend some time coaching them up. And frankly, just like with your veteran clients, the coaching never stops. The coaching's different, but the coaching never stops. And hopefully, I think if I look at the operators that build really good teams and have maybe, at least as close as possible to their ideal role, they're always coaching up their team members and they're always kind of pouring as much time and resources into them because I mean, ultimately that is the face of our business and that is the challenge. It's both the problem and the upside of our business is the people in it. And so, but on the positive side, it also takes you from this, I'm doing everything, I got to figure it out myself, to having your business that you don't have to be tied to.
So if you've been stuck just kind of saying, okay, I'm going to figure it out, and that's led you down the road of too much consumption, not enough production, or I'm going to just wear every hat and do it all myself. Hopefully we shared a few tips to break free from that and get through that bottleneck so your business can keep growing and improving. And that's Doug and Pat with another episode of The Wealthy Gym Owners.